Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much. I am very honored to be here, to be invited here. Thank you to the Studium for inviting me, for organizing the travel so brilliantly, and everything happened very well, despite the air companies and public transports and so on. I'm finally here. I'm glad for that. There were a few problems about that. I'm very glad to be here. And we will be talking about our collaboration, myself and Guillaume, in our fellowship from 2017. Thank you. To 2018. I was invited to collaborate with the IRAMAT, which is an institute that is specialized in applying sciences to archaeology. And that will be the theme of what we will be talking about, how we got extra value by collaborating. So, my project, or our project, was about coinage in Normandy in 10th century. I had already been working on that for a while. That is when the Vikings came to Normandy, as you know, settled in Normandy, made a colony there, a very successful one that was developed into the Duchy of Normandy and was organized society. My idea, our idea, was to study the coinage and see how the coinage could contribute to that. And the idea is that coinage is more than just coins and more than just an item that coin collectors collect and look at all the different varieties and other interesting things. But they are also, they tell us about society, they tell us about how society evolved, how the economics were, and how the state, that is a modern concept, but I use it to make it more understandable, how the state was organized, how institutions evolved, because coins need to be struck, controlled, and so on. So that was the idea of the project, to see how that was done in a 10th century setting, and more so, how did the Vikings do that when they came to France. I will not talk very much about that today. That'll be in the publications of the project more in detail, because I will concentrate on what were the benefits of being here and work in the IRAMAT laboratory. So, I am in humanities. I'm very much in humanities. I work with history, archaeology. And I think, if I may, that I'm quite good at that. When the Swedish archaeologist nearby Stockholm University, where I work now, found this hoard 2 years ago, they showed me the coins from this hoard. You see them in the middle of this picture. And I immediately saw that there was a Norman coin from ducal Normandy. And that is, it's not exceptional, but it's quite rare in Sweden. And I was very happy to see this Norman coin, because I was working on Norman coins. And I went to the literature and found out that it was this type that was only known from an illustration from 1790. So that was even more interesting. So by this new find in Sweden, we could show that this coin really existed because colleagues had been discussing for 200 years whether this drawing from the late 18th century was just a misinterpretation of a badly struck specimen or if it was a real type. So by this new find, we could prove that this type does exist, it was really struck, and moreover, with this hoard that was clearly a 10th century hoard, we could prove that it was 10th century and not 11th century as colleagues had suggested before they had this new evidence. This is the brilliant thing about archaeology, that things evolve a lot. With new finds, you can change the knowledge from one day to another. I have several times written articles with a postscript. When this paper was in press, this new find proved that I was completely wrong and it had to be interpreted the opposite way. That are things that happens. This time this was better. It was rather confirming what we knew and making more precision. So, well, I can also look at coin finds like this one from Normandy from the 10th century and others, and I can look at the coins. I can say, well, this hoard is mainly made up by Norman coins. There are very few coins from outside. There are very few old coins. So the power in Normandy controlled coinage very, very thoroughly. The coin circulation, the coin striking. That is the kind of work that I usually do. And my brain is rather into humanities, as you see. It's rather gray in the other part. I was good at math in school, but I haven't really developed that since then. So, and one has to be pluridisciplinary. We have heard a lot about this. Well, why should we? Well, sometimes, now I'm a little bit unpleasant, sometimes because the funding bodies ask us to be pluridisciplinary, so we have to be it. And also because humanities often are in the bottom of the hierarchy, and then working with scientists, we can have a little bit of more of prestige. But frankly, often it can be useful. It can be give results, good results. It has to be thought well. It has not just to be, you know, the appendix you bought a study from a scientist and you didn't really work with the person and then it was put in. It has to be done really good. And what is the solution to that? Well, I sometimes went to seminars where I heard two scientists discuss whether this or that method was the right one. Of course, one of them was the right, but they did not agree on that. And I was just counting the points and didn't really understand anything, and how should I find out which one to do? And the result is to work with Guillaume, people like Guillaume, because Guillaume is a very good example of a scientist, a chemist, who is working in archaeology, so he understands the problems that we have, the questions that we have, the kind of things we need to know when I talk about my problems, what I want to do. Guillaume understands it right away, and that is really, really good. So here's another day at the office when we work together. Well, it was not like that every time. I'll just give you one example. This is a very simple example, and we had a lot more results, but that will take too long. So I'll just give you one example. I am very good at looking at coins from the outside of the coin, like you see on the photos. Here are two specimens of the same type. As you see, there's a dot and a cross in the angles of the cross at the reverse of this coin. And on some specimens, they are disposed in one way, and on other specimens in another way. And my first thought was just, well, it was a die engraver when he did the second die. He didn't really think of it. It was just an accident. It was not really on purpose. But then Guillaume made a lot of analyses, and we saw that all the specimens that we analyzed of this type was 75% silver, and all the specimens that we analyzed of the other variety was 55. So we really got new results, and this is not just an anecdotic result that it's fun to know. It is really something that shows us that the power that struck these coins, the Duke of Normandy, he controlled things. He had a system of secret marks, so he and his officers could distinguish between the good ones and the bad ones. And it was not just random, everything was controlled and organized and really institutionalized. So that is one example of what we got out of that collaboration, and now I'll leave the word to you.
Thank you, Jens. He did not see this one earlier. So in September 2017, Jens arrived from Denmark to Orléans for working with Marc Bonpère, his host and my colleague, and myself as a co-host for a period of 1 year at my laboratory, the Research Institute on archaeomatériaux, or IRAMAT, as Jens already mentioned. My laboratory gathers chemists, as myself, physicists, as well as historians and archaeologists working in the field of archaeometry, the study of ancient materials by scientific techniques. You all know about archaeometry in a way or another, from the radiocarbon dating of ancient organic materials or the dating of ancient trees by measuring the distance between their rings, as you can see on the slide. Besides dating, a significant part of archaeometry is the characterization of the composition of ancient materials. At the IRAMAT in Orléans, we are mostly specialized in the characterization of ancient metals, particularly coins. The earliest traces we have of archaeometric analysis of ancient coins date back to the end of the 18th century with the work of the famous chemist Martin Klaproth. The chemical technique he developed remained in use during the 19th century. Nonetheless, it required the destruction of a significant part of the coin for making the analysis, which is not satisfactory from a conservation point of view. Nowadays, except in rare cases, analytical studies of ancient materials, and especially coins, should be carried out in a non-destructive way, or at least with minimally invasive damage made to the sample. Here are some of the most widespread methods, which are the facilities we have at the IRAMAT Orléans. Since the 1950s, non-destructive analysis of ancient metals, in particular coins, developed with the application of new techniques, mostly nuclear and spectroscopic. Nowadays, different types of techniques exist depending on the relevant information that needs to be determined to answer a scientific question. Mostly elemental analysis for the determination of the fineness of the coins, for the case of silver and gold coins, and the main elements of the alloy in the case of copper coins. The determination of minor and trace elements which are associated with the main metal as impurities or with the alloy metal in the coins, especially for technical purposes of provenance study of the metal. Isotopic analysis, which is the determination of the ratios between different isotopes of an element for provenance studies and concerns mostly lead. And metrolographic study, which concerns mostly copper-based alloys and which allows, by the study of cross sections, to determine the making process of the coin, if it's just casted or casted and struck, or hammered and then struck. In the project we developed with Jens, metallographic study was out of scope and isotopic analysis could not be carried out for practical and funding reasons. As a consequence, our analytical study relied on elemental analysis of the 10th century coins from Normandy, Jens mentioned earlier. So for the purpose of our study, 140 coins from Normandy of the Viking period were analyzed at my laboratory. The coins came mostly from the Department of Coins and Medals of the French National Library in Paris, the most important coin collection in France and one of the principal in the world, as well from other museums especially in Normandy, and even from the Mont Saint-Michel, where we went to a trip at the end of the stay of Jens in Orléans. In addition to the 150 10th century coins from Normandy, we also analyzed 50 earlier coins from Normandy of the 9th century for having a comparison of the earlier period from the same area. The method used for the analysis allowed to determine both the fineness of the coins, which is the content of precious metals, as you saw in the example showed by Jens a few minutes ago, as well as trace elements, which are impurities in the metal, which can help us to distinguish between different stocks of metal and consequently to have clues about their provenance. The selection of the coins to be analyzed was made in common by Jens and myself from his classification of the 10th century coins of Normandy and according to their availability in the collections. Then we made comparisons of the compositions of the coins of our corpus among the different groups identified by Jens, and finally comparisons with results concerning coins of earlier periods from Normandy and outside in France, in different regions of France, and as far as Germany and England. During the stay of Jens in Orléans, we gave one communication, which was about the devaluation Jens mentioned in the example he presented, and two publications, one of them in the proceedings of the Viking conference in Denmark. At the end of the project, Jens, two colleagues, and myself organized two conferences, one in Paris, the second in Orléans, supported by Le Studium, whom we thank for their availability and efficiency. The following year of our Le Studium Fellowship, we obtained a 1-month grant from the University of Orléans for Jens to come back at my laboratory to go on working on the interpretation of our results. It gave us the opportunity to organize a general public conference about the traces left by the Vikings in France, and particularly coins, as you can imagine. We also worked on the publication of a book that will gather the numismatic classification made by Jens on the 10th century coins from Normandy, my analytical results, and our common interpretations we are still building up and debating. As a chemist specialized in the analysis of ancient coins, I either make the whole process of study and the analysis of the coins by myself, either I collaborate with a numismatist who is specialized in a particular period of coinage, as I did with Jens. Jens not only has a very deep knowledge of the Viking period coinage of Normandy, but also of medieval coins from France and Northern Europe, their history, archaeology, and the economy of this period. Working together with Jens during 1 year allowed us to know each other better, gain from each other's knowledge, and understand the way of thinking of researchers of different origins. Our scientific production was thus not the only addition of what we could have achieved working separately on the same topic, but was much more significant and emphasized what can be expected from the collaborations allowed by Le Studium. Thank you for your attention.